この番組はステートストリートインベストメントマネジメントの提供でお送りします。
こんにちは。今週も始まりました金曜日のゴールド、キャスターの佐藤美希です。近年安全資産として注目を集めている金、ゴールドへの投資にスポットを当て、さまざまな視点からその戦略的な価値を探ってまいります。今回は先週に続いて金の国際的な調査機関であるワールドゴールドカウンシルで中国を除くアジア太平洋地域責任者および中央銀行部門グローバル責任者を務めるシャオカイファンさんへの単独インタビューをお届けします。前回はワールドゴールドカウンシルの役割についてや金価格高騰の要因などについてお話をいただきました。2回目にあたる今回は金の供給の現状や日本における金投資の展望、さらにワールドゴールドカウンシルが進めている事業の今後など幅広くお話を伺っています。では最初に、価格の高騰が続いている中で金の供給にどんな変化が起きているのか伺いました。
So gold supply comes from two sources. Newly mined gold, of course gold that's dug out of the ground, that's typically around 75% of supply, and recycled gold, which is 25%. Recycled gold is simply when people sell jewelry back into the gold market, or when you sell your iPhone back, they remove the gold components and that goes back into the supply chain. On the newly mined gold supply, of course the gold price is very high right now, and you would think that that would entice additional supply coming from miners. But unfortunately, mining operations are very complex. You can't just flip a switch and have much more gold come out of the ground, as much as the miners would like to see that. So newly mined gold supply has only increased by 1 to 2% year on year, so a very slow increase. But on gold recycling, actually we've seen some interesting results there. Typically speaking, when the gold price is very high, like it is now, volumes for gold recycling increase because households, individuals are much more incentivized to sell gold back into supply chain. But we haven't seen a significant increase right now. Gold recycling supply, although it has not grown by as much as the gold price would suggest. And I think that that phenomenon with recycling does point to some interesting behavior right now. Why has the recycling volume not increased as much as the price might suggest? I think it might be three different things. One is simply people expect the gold price to go up more, so they're not selling now. Two is that they might have sold their gold earlier because this current bull market cycle for gold has gone on for quite some time. And if they sold their gold earlier, of course they don't have the gold to sell anymore. But the third reason is this rise in the gold price does not coincide with a major economic dislocation like we saw during previous rises, like during COVID, for instance. So households and individuals simply may not have that pressing need to sell their gold right now to get that liquidity. So of course, if the gold price keeps on going up, that will incentivize people to sell gold back into the supply chain more. But I think that overall, we might not see a major change in recycling patterns because the reasons for holding gold are probably going to persist. If there's a major economic downturn, then yes, I think we might see a little bit more gold supply coming in, but hopefully that won't happen.
金価格の高騰が続いている割にはさほど供給が増えない、その背景については金鉱山での採掘は簡単に増えるものではないということでしたね。またリサイクルでの調査もありました。すでにかなりの金が売られていて、売れる金があまり残っていないのではないかということ、まだ手元にあるという方もいらっしゃるかもしれません。では続いて、インフレ基調が続く中で日本の金投資の現状と未来について伺いました。
Yes, I think so. I think gold traditionally plays a role as an inflation hedge, and sort of the persistent inflation that we've seen in many markets around the world has been one reason that investors have been turning to gold. But for Japan specifically, I think that this is the first time that Japan has experienced inflation in an entire generation. And maybe many investors here just don't know what to do because they haven't encountered inflation before. So it makes sense that gold has become a much more natural way for Japanese investors to hedge against inflation. Yes, I think so as well. I think that cash level holdings in Japan are famously very high, but the inflation level and the fact that it's back for the first time, inflation is back for the first time in 30 years, will really force a lot of Japanese investors to think about how they protect against inflation. But it's not just inflation. I think that, of course, the yen is very weak now. And a weakening yen means that Japanese investors will face higher prices for imported goods too. Gold can, of course, play a role in helping to preserve purchasing power, which is another reason for why I think Japanese investors are valuing gold a lot more. And then finally, it's the rising geopolitical challenges because we are in a very different world than we were before. Japanese investors are becoming much more aware of that fact as well, which is potentially another reason that they're turning to gold more. At the individual level, I think, yes, some retail investors do take that into consideration, and that might be part of the reasons for buying gold. But certainly at the central bank level, I think that is a major driver for why many central banks around the world are considering investing in gold. It may not be that they think that their own country is going to be subject to major political shocks, but it just seems like overall there's a lot more instability and turbulence in the world, and gold, with its safe haven characteristics, has done very well to protect against these types of instabilities, which might be why central banks want to add more of it into their portfolios. So cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, they of course have some superficial similarities with gold, which is why I think some people think that cryptocurrencies are a form of digital gold, but I think that those similarities are really just superficial. They focus on the fact that they are limited in quantity and are seen as substitutes for fiat currency. But if you look at the financial behavior of cryptocurrencies versus gold, you'll see that the behavior is very, very different. Gold is much more of a safe haven asset. It might be also a counter-cyclical asset, whereas cryptocurrencies typically are a little bit more correlated with risk. They tend to go up when risk sentiment is high. So the relationship that they have is actually very different than each other, so there's room for both. Yeah, I think that cryptocurrencies have not really proven themselves as a safe haven asset yet. Of course, I think their history is relatively short, so that might change over time. But if you look at recent history, for instance, on the day that Russia invaded Ukraine, we saw that gold went up, as it should, as you would expect, as a safe haven asset, but cryptocurrencies went down. And a few weeks ago, when there was more tension between the US and China on trade relationships, gold went up, but cryptocurrencies went down. So maybe that will change in the future, but for right now, I don't think cryptocurrencies have that safe haven characteristic yet.
日本でも近年金投資への注目が高まっていますけれども、価格高騰のほかに30年ぶりのインフレ、また円安から資産を守る、そういった意味から金投資に目が向き始めたこと、そして日本での金投資が今後さらに加速するだろうという見通しでした。またワールドゴールドカウンシル自体が日本の市場へも注目しているということが伝わってきました。それでは一旦 CM です。国際的な金の調査機関ワールドゴールドカウンシルのシャオカイファンさんへの単独インタビューをお届けしています。最後はワールドゴールドカウンシルが進めている事業の3つの柱の詳細と今後について、さらに金市場の構造がどう変化してきたのか、その未来像についてもお話を伺いました。
The first pillar is focused on awareness, and that means building understanding of gold. We work with a variety of different investors, including central banks, of course, which I cover, but also institutional and retail investors. And we provide them with information and education on the gold market. We also have a very large research team, probably the largest research team that's dedicated to gold, covering various different aspects of understanding how the market functions, providing data and information, and also having different models and tools for investors to use to understand the gold market. The second pillar is focused on trust, and that means improving how the gold market functions, creating standards to help govern the gold market, and also working with areas of the gold market that need to improve to try to build more trust and therefore a little bit more awareness of gold as an investable asset. So I'll give you a couple of examples of this. We work with gold mining companies to develop the responsible gold mining principles that basically state the requirements for them to extract gold responsibly. Another stream of work we're doing is on small-scale gold mining, where we're trying to improve and formalize that aspect of the market to help to address some of the problems that are associated with small-scale gold mining. The final pillar is on improving access, which simply put means helping those who want to buy gold to be able to buy gold. And that might include creating new channels for people to buy gold, or at least creating an environment where those channels can thrive. It also means working with regulators and policymakers on improving the rules around accessing gold from a financial perspective in many markets around the world. Finally, it also means that we are focused on improving the future nature of gold, and that making sure that gold is ready for the financial markets of the future by working on things like digitalization and tokenization. I think the gold market today in 2025 is a completely different market than what we saw in the 1990s, for instance. And that's because I think there have been three major changes that have happened to this market. The first is that emerging market countries like China and India have grown to become much, much bigger economies. And they buy a lot of gold, and that's created a lot more structural demand for gold going forward. The second structural change is the creation of gold exchange-traded funds, or gold ETFs, roughly 20 years ago. That really revolutionized how investors access gold, because before ETFs, if you wanted to buy gold, you probably could only buy physical gold, or maybe the share of a gold mining company. But with the emergence of gold ETFs, you could simply click a few buttons on your brokerage account and have access to gold. And that's really unlocked a significantly large pool of additional demand for the gold market. And the third structural change is the shift of behavior of central banks. Before 2010, central banks were actually largely net sellers of gold. They sold gold throughout the 1980s, 90s, and the early 2000s. But since 2010, central banks have become net buyers of gold, and which has only accelerated in the last 3 years. And that's added a significant new pillar of demand for gold overall. But I think we actually might be on the verge of a potential fourth structural change for gold, and that's gold becoming much more mainstream in investment portfolios across different types of investors and in different geographies as well. It seems like a lot of investors are now much more focused on gold than they were before, because they perceive that there's a major structural shift happening in the world, whether at the political level or at the financial level. And they think that gold can help them to manage some of these risks as we go through these changes. We've seen major investment banks saying that you should consider having 20% of gold in your portfolio in a 60-20-20 portfolio instead of the traditional 60-40 equity bond only portfolio. And I think that that means that gold is going to be a much more continuous component of investment going forward.
ここまで2週にわたってワールドゴールドカウンシルシャオカイファンさんへのインタビューをお届けしました。これまで番組では金市場の構造の変化についてさまざまな角度から取り上げてきましたけれども、今回のインタビューで金 ETF の登場が新たな市場需要を掘り起こしたという、それが構造変化を促した大きな要因の一つということがとても印象に残っています。金投資に対する現状の分析、また課題はもちろん、分かりやすくお話をいただきました。番組では今後もワールドゴールドカウンシルが発信する内容を活用しながら、視聴者の皆さんに役立つ情報をお届けしてまいります。金曜日のゴールド、今週はここまでです。また来週通常回としてお届けします。それでは。
この番組はステートストリートインベストメントマネジメントの提供でお送りしました。